Good morning, and welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. I hope this morning's prelude put a smile on your face. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, minister of the fellowship, and along with all of its members, I want to tell you how glad we are that you're with us this morning. I have to start with a warning. As you may have guessed by the prelude, this morning's service is going to be a bit different. If you're not ready to laugh a bit, maybe even at yourself, you can tune out now if you want, but we certainly hope you won't. You know, we pride ourselves on being an inclusive community where everyone is welcome. So you're welcome this morning, no matter if you're a grouch, an unbearably annoying person, a relentlessly serious person, or even a sickeningly sweet person. I want to begin by giving some assurances to Paula and even Malcolm, who will play something later. Please don't feel threatened by this morning's pianist for the prelude. As wonderful as she or it was, I understand that her repertoire is very limited, so you're not out of a job. You know, it's often said about Unitarian Universalists that they simply don't like ritual. So how do we start our service each week? Of course, with a ritual. And so we will again today. We'll bring our community together as one by lighting our flaming chalice. And as we do, I'd like to share part of a poem by David Lessard with you. Lighten Up by David Lessard. I went to my guru and asked, "What's the secret of life?" He laughed aloud and said, "For Christ's sakes, lighten up. Life's too short to be miserable. Love all you know and then some. Take them all underneath your wing. Drink with them, a bottle of rum. There's good times and there's bad. Which do you want to choose? Running in the halls of heaven or a constant string of the blues? You have the choice, my friend. It's really up to you. Nobody needs to tell you exactly what to do. Lighten up," he told me. "Laugh and love and smile. The sorrow's always in you. Don't make your life a trial." So I've decided to lighten up, to become a cheerful, funny bloke, to smile at life's sweet bitterness with laughter, with joy, and a joke. Well, there's nothing like a song to bring us together and lift our spirits. I now invite you to join in singing hymn 354, "We Laugh, We Cry." The words will appear on your screen momentarily.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel
Good morning. I'm Dan Newspiel, the president of your fellowship, and I add my welcome to all of you. Please join me and Diana Amaya in reciting our spoken covenant. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
Now I have a few words from our COVID-19 task force. Most of us are privileged to have been vaccinated, and we look forward to gathering together again safely in person. But we're concerned that the Delta variant is spreading here in San Miguel and throughout the world, even among those who are vaccinated. While the vaccine will usually protect us from hospitalization and death, we can still get pretty sick. Also, vaccinated people who get infected may show no symptoms, so we could be unknowingly spreading the virus to others who may be more vulnerable. So, is now the time to be easing up on safe practices? We think not. Instead, we should be strengthening our precautions, both in and outside of our homes. You know what that means: masking, distancing, and avoiding events of more than a handful of people, especially indoors. In line with this, our board has recently canceled all fellowship-sponsored indoor events with more than 5 people. This has been a stressful time for many of us, and some of us have been coping with the emotional burdens of the pandemic in unhealthy ways, like eating or drinking too much or experiencing sleep problems. What are some healthier alternatives to coping with stress at this time? Take a break from electronic devices, meditate, exercise, connect with other people, develop healthier eating habits, find ways to do good for others who are less fortunate than you. And as we'll hear today, some laughter may help. Above all, please stay safe and be well, my friends. Now back to our minister, the Reverend Tom Rosiello, for joys and concerns.
Even in a service when our focus is on humor, we still take time for members and friends to share significant joys, sorrows, and concerns with their community. For each joy, sorrow, or concern, we'll light a candle, indicating that that person or that thought or that prayer is held in our hearts this morning. If you have a joy, sorrow, or concern you'd like to have shared in a future service, please email it to me. If you have one today that you've not emailed in, please feel free to type it into the chat now. Our first candle is from so many of you, and it's for our member Ann Geyer. Ann is with us this morning from the hospital room, and it's so wonderful to see her. This week she had a chest x-ray that revealed her pneumonia had worsened and she was hospitalized again. The good news is she's getting great care, but it'll require a significant period to fully get rid of the pneumonia. I bet she'd love your support and good well wishes. Consider sending her a note or an email. She's going to be kind of bored in that hospital, and get well wishes to her, and her email is posted in the chat now. Trish Schneider asked us to light a candle of great concern for all the women of Afghanistan, those who are in danger for the work they've done, and those who are losing the opportunity of education and employment, those whose lives are in danger, whose equal worth and dignity is denied, and whose dreams have been shattered. We stand in solidarity with them. We light another candle for other lives that are endangered in Afghanistan, those associated with the US or NATO forces, and certainly the LGBT community. The Taliban has vowed to trap gay men and torture and kill them. In the words of one Islamic judge, they'll either be stoned to death or crushed to death by pushing a 10-foot wall on top of them. They also support honor killing, where families kill their lesbian daughters or gay sons to restore the honor of the family. This is a candle for all those suffering from extreme weather and fire. Our hearts are with them, and our commitment to address climate change and the destruction of our planet, which is causing these events, is strengthened. This candle is for all those who are experiencing breakthrough infections with COVID, and also one of hope for those who are still not vaccinated to do so as soon as possible. Now we have a couple of joys. This one is for Bonnie McDowell and Andrea Kaufman, as they've just moved into their new home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And this one is a happy birthday wish for Judy Rosenthal, who I believe birthday is today. And as always, we light a final candle for all those joys, sorrows, and concerns, either typed into the chat now or held in our hearts, but remain unspoken this morning. After joys, sorrows, and concerns, we usually take a few minutes for some spiritual practice, perhaps something that takes us deeper in our concerns, something that comes to our mind, our spirits. Sometimes we call this prayer or reflection or meditation, and there are many different forms of each of these. We usually think of this as a time of silence or maybe softly spoken words, but not necessarily. Did you know that some Zen monasteries begin and end their day every day with 15 minutes of laughter? And I learned from Paula Peace that at her former UU church in Atlanta, they offered weekly sessions of laughing yoga. So our time of spiritual practice this morning, I invite you to experience laughing yoga.
Laughter yoga is a set of exercises that is designed and geared for laughing for no reason. You don't need jokes or funny stories or comedy. It's for everybody and anybody can do it. It's based on clapping and then pranayamic yoga breathing and then laughing. It's based on the idea and the theory that if you laugh, the physics of laughing, your body will not understand whether it's genuine or fake laugh and will still benefit from it. It started in 1995 by a medical doctor called Dr. Madan Kataria from India. He developed these exercises and now it's spread around more than 60 countries, about 6,000 laughter clubs around the world. Now they've started using it at corporates, at prisons, for children, for people with special needs, for elderly people, because there are some exercises we do that will help the coordination of the eye and the movement of the hands and revive the memory, because laughter yoga helps in the flow of oxygen into the blood and the main organs of the body. I still feel people cannot get out of their comfort zone and they cannot get rid of their negative beliefs, and I thought Laughter yoga will help them to feel free, to boost their self-esteem. So I combine the coaching with the laughter yoga to help people feel at ease and be happy and fulfill their aims and achieve their goals. I found that life is very stressful, especially with all what's happening around us. So people need some kind of exercise to laugh for no reason, to be more healthy, to have more energy in them. It's for any age, for anybody. Just bring your laugh and come along.
I'd like to tell you a story. It's supposed to be a true story, but who knows? An elderly couple went into McDonald's. They walked up to the counter, and I guess they bought what's called a Happy Meal. You know, one burger, one packet of fries, and one soda drink. And they took it over to the table, and they sat down opposite each other. And the elderly man took the hamburger and cut it exactly in half, put half in front of him and half in front of his wife. He then took the French fries and counted them out, half in front of him, half in front of his wife. In between them was the cold drink, which they took turns sipping from. Well, there were many young families in McDonald's at that time, and they were watching this couple, and they were all thinking sort of the same thing. This poor couple can't even afford a meal for each of them. So one of the dads in these families went over and said to them, I would really like to buy you a second meal. May I do that? And the elderly gentleman said, oh, no. We share everything. So he went back. Pretty soon, a woman came up to them and pretty much the same thing, asked if she could buy a meal, and the wife this time said, no, we share everything. We're fine. Well, then that first gentleman who kept watching them noticed that the man had eaten all his burger and most of his fries, and the woman hadn't touched any of the food in front of her, just an occasional sip on the drink. So he went back over and he said, I'd like to renew my offer to buy another meal for you, but, you said that you share everything, but you haven't touched your food yet. What are you waiting for? And the woman looked at him and smiled, and he knew the answer even before she said the words, the teeth. Well, we're now going to go to Christy McHugh, who's going to ask you to share generously. But I promise we do have limits, and she will not ask you to share your teeth. Christy?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Christy McHugh, and I serve on your board of directors. We decided to mix things up in our offering intro. Usually we spotlight one of the NGOs which we support, but other times like today, we're going to spotlight members of our staff or one of our hardworking committees that are comprised solely of volunteers. Today, I'd like to share a bit about one of our newest groups, the Envisioning Our Future Committee. What would you say if you were requested to dream big and imagine what our fellowship would be like in 2, 5, or even 10 years? That was exactly the board's mission for this group. This was a time for bold, audacious visions with nuts and bolts to follow later. For instance, would we enjoy having Sunday services and other programs fostering a truly diverse, multicultural community with young and old, English and Spanish speakers, members of the LGBTQ community, families and singles, all seeking spiritual community and dedicated to social justice? Or what would it be like to establish our fellowship as one of the most important social action residency programs in the whole UU denomination, where volunteers from Mexico, the US, and Canada come to San Miguel for several weeks to volunteer with a Mexican NGO while studying Spanish and culture? Or why can't we launch a comprehensive and convenient recycling center right here in San Miguel? And a really big dream, but oh my gosh, how exciting would it be one day to have a senior housing connected with family living, resulting in an intergenerational community experience, offering deep relationships to families and individuals of all ages. These ideas are just a few of what the Envisioning Our Future Committee thought up and proposed. They certainly did dream big. This committee was comprised of Trish Snyder, Paula Peace, Ellie Goodwin, Daniela Franco, Bill Dulcimer, and Jürgen Ehlers. Thanks to all of them. I invite you to read their entire report and see what exciting dreams could be our reality one day. But for now, this week's offering will be collected and most gratefully received. Thank you.
De ti yo recibo, a ti te doy, así compartimos y vivimos hoy. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. De ti yo recibo, a ti te doy, así compartimos y vivimos hoy. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
I'd like to share a reading with you. It's from a pamphlet written collectively by the Mayo Clinic staff members. Whether you're guffawing at a sitcom on TV or quietly giggling at a newspaper cartoon, laughing does you good. Laughter is a great form of stress relief, and that's no joke. A good sense of humor can't cure all ailments, but data is mounting about the positive things laughter can do. A good laugh has great short-term effects. When you start to laugh, it doesn't just lighten your load mentally, it actually induces physical changes in your body. Laughter can stimulate many organs. Laughter enhances your intake of oxygen-rich air, stimulates your heart, lungs, and muscles, and increases the endorphins that are released in your brain. Activate and relieve your stress response. A rollicking laugh fires up and then cools down your stress response, and it can increase your heart rate and blood pressure. The result? A good, relaxing feeling. Soothe tension. Laughter can also stimulate circulation and aid in muscle relaxation, both of which can reduce some of the physical symptoms of stress. Laughter isn't just a quick pick-me-up. It's good for you over the long term, too. Laughter may improve your immune system. Negative thoughts manifest in chemical reactions that can affect your body by bringing more stress into your system and decreasing your immunity. In contrast, positive thoughts can actually release neuropeptides that help fight stress and potentially more serious illness. Relieve pain. Laughter may ease pain by causing the body to produce its own natural painkillers. May increase personal satisfaction. Laughter can also make it easier to cope with difficult situations. It also helps you connect with other people. And finally, improve your mood. Many people experience depression, sometimes due to chronic illness. Laughter can help lessen your depression and anxiety and may even make you feel better. Well, there's so many ways we can enjoy laughter and joy, and music is one of them, which we've tried to bring to you in the service. I hope that piece that Malcolm just played, Dizzy Fingers, brought a chuckle and a laugh and a smile. It's the kind of music that was intended to do that. But sometimes something happens in the performance of even the most serious of musical selections that can bring a smile to your face. Try this one out. Well, as the people from the Mayo Clinic told us, laughter is good for your body, your physical and emotional health. And if you're not modern science-oriented person and prefer a more ancient biblical version, you can find the same conclusion in the book of Proverbs, where it's written, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit saps a person's strength." To put it simply, embracing joy and laughter is good for your spiritual health, and it's good for our religious community. In several religious traditions, laughter is actually recognized as a spiritual practice. I mentioned earlier that there's Zen monasteries that begin and end the day with 15 minutes of laughter. The spiritual teacher Osho recommended long periods of laughter before meditation. And even in Catholic theology, it's said that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. And I hope that video of the silent monks finding a way to sing the Alleluia chorus reminded us that even in the most austere traditions, there has to be some fun and joy. Do you know that children are said that they laugh 100 to 200 times a day, and an adult only a couple of times, and maybe not even once? We've lost something valuable in our growing up, and it's not laughing enough. Laughing may not seem like have much of a place in serious religion, but have you ever noticed how much the Dali Lama laughs? Laughter is just good for the soul. Laughter can clear your mind, lift our spirits. It can begin a healing process. Even when we're grieving, remembering a funny story about a departed loved one can lessen our pain. I believe that humor makes it easier to talk about some things, especially when there's stress and conflict. When I started as a minister in the church where I'm now the minister emeritus, they had a lot of difficulty of talking about money, especially from the pulpit. So each Sunday at the offering, I would tell a funny story or a joke that would somehow be tied into giving, like the one I told you today. Part of the fun was the congregation figuring out how I was going to turn that story into an ask for generous giving. It became a time in the service when everyone laughed. And guess what? They gave with increasing generosity too. You know, and like those angels in Catholic theology, we too need to take ourselves more lightly. And I mean that as individuals and as a community and a religious institution as well. You know, there are probably more jokes involving religion than any other single topic. First, and that's fine, let me say first, so long as they're not hurtful or degrading to any sect, at least in my opinion. Most often, people actually make jokes about their own tradition. And there's reason for that, because we need to see the lighter side of who we are, even when we're dealing with some of the most serious topics. You know, there must be how many people it takes to change a light bulb joke for every religious tradition in the world. You know, for Presbyterians, the answer is, why should we change a light bulb as God has predetermined which light bulb should shine and which should not? Or for Episcopalians, it's 10. 1 to call the electrician and 9 to reminisce about how they liked the old light bulb much better. Do you know how many Unitarian Universalists it takes to change a light bulb? Are you ready for the answer? Here we go. We choose not to make a statement either in favor or against the need for a light bulb. However, if on your journey you have found that light bulbs work for you, that's fine. You're invited to form a committee, write a poem, or compose a modern dance about your light bulb experience for next Sunday's service, during which we will explore a number of light bulb traditions, including incandescent, LED, fluorescent, three-way, long life, and tinted, all of which are equally valid paths to luminescence. Many jokes involve contrasting one religion to another. How many versions of the priest, minister, and rabbi in the rowboat are there? Another similar joke formula is between the believer and the non-believer, like this one I heard recently. There was a very religious woman that had to do a lot of traveling for business, and so she had to fly a lot, but flying made her nervous. So she always took her Bible along with her to read, as it helped her relax during the long flights. One time she was sitting next to a man who, when he saw her pull out her Bible, gave a little chuckle and a smirk and then went back to what he was doing. After a while, he turned to her again and asked, "You don't really believe all the stuff that's in there, do you?" The lady replied, "Of course I do, sir. It's the Bible." He said, "Well, what about that guy that was swallowed by the whale?" She replied, "Oh, you mean Jonah? Yes, I believe that. It's in the Bible." He asked, "Well, how do you suppose he possibly survived all that time inside the whale?" The lady said, "Well, I don't really know. I guess when I get to heaven, I will ask him." "What if he isn't in heaven?" the man asked sarcastically. "Well, then, I guess you'll have to ask him," the lady replied. I think it's okay to poke a little fun at ourselves and even the beliefs of others. The truth is that we need not only feel free to poke a little fun at religion, but also to bring a little humor and have some fun in our worship. Our coming together on Sunday morning should always, and above all else, be a joyful experience. Many times people who come to a UU service for the first time have commented to me that they'd never been to a church where people actually laughed during the service and how they actually like that. And there's good reason why people do. In the midst of all the serious and important things we discuss, even in the difficult ministries we do to the sick and the grieving, lots of funny things just happen. So in this morning's sermon, I want to share with you some of the funny things that happened in church. And before I get going on that, perhaps a good place to start was with the advice of the famous cigar-smoking George Burns, who said the best sermons are one with really good beginnings and great endings, and the shortest distance possible between the two. But seeing today's sermon is fun, I hope you'll cut me a little slack. I want to talk with you about the funny things that have happened in church and to me in my role as a minister. I should start by saying I was no novice to church humor before I became a minister. I had witnessed lots of funny things happening in church. As a precocious child, one of my early experiences in the service was when I yelled out to my very proper grandma, "How come that guy can wear his bathrobe to church and I had to put on my good clothes?" When in high school and in college, I made a few dollars playing the organ at a large inner-city Catholic church, and lots of funny things happened there. You might know that for Catholics, the Easter Vigil service is the most important service of the year. It's one with lots of ceremony and logistics. Everything has to be just right. And aren't those the situations where something always goes wrong? One year, the church ladies were setting up for the big service. Now that church had these spring-loaded candles, the type that the actual candle goes in a tube and a spring pushes up the candle so it always looks like it's full length. Well, the ladies reasoned this was going to be a long service. And they surely didn't want the candles to run out, not on Easter. So they decided to replace them all. Well, there's sort of a tricky top mechanism on each of those candles that you have to turn just right to keep the spring down and the candle from coming up out of the tube. Well, the ladies replaced all the candles and all was set. And at the high point in the service, the symbolic moment when the resurrection is proclaimed, the organ and choir blast out the Gloria and the candles are lit. Well, with the vibration and the attempts to light the candles, one by one they blasted off, maybe 15 feet into the air, crisscrossing the sanctuary with the clergy ducking and covering their heads. And people didn't know whether to cheer or gasp, as they weren't sure if this was an accident or someone's new idea on how to portray the resurrection experience. Some of you, I'm sure, will remember that the old Catholic tradition, still followed in many churches in San Miguel, was that all the statues were covered with a drape during Lent, and it wasn't until certain point in the Easter service when the drapes were removed. Well, in another church where I did a little job as a singer in the choir, I watched an altar boy reach up with a pole to remove a covering from a statue high up on the altar. He had trouble getting it, but he finally got the satin drape loose. But as he was bringing it down on the pole, it got away from him and landed in the lit altar candles and burst into flames. Well, not to be outdone, the other altar boy grabbed the fire extinguisher and it kind of got away from him, spraying foam all over everything, the candles, the Easter lilies, and the highly polished marble floor, which now made it impossible for the elderly priest to walk on without sliding and falling. He was left clinging to the altar for dear life, and finally, a group from the congregation had to come up and rescue him and clean the entire area before the service could resume. And then there was the Christmas Eve midnight mass. The church was packed, and a line for people to receive communion was very long. At the very end of that line was a mentally challenged man who I'd often seen and often showed up in this inner city church. The priest extended his hand to put the communion bread in the man's hand. But you see, the man had been holding up his pants. So when he let go of them to take the bread, his pants fell to the floor, revealing that he was not wearing any underwear. Much to the shock of the congregation, there he stood naked from the waist down, calmly waiting for the wine. The old priest quickly put down the chalice and dropped down to the floor directly in front of the man to try and pull up his pants. Well, it was at that point that the choir was to sing a big anthem at the end of communion. The organist's back was to the congregation. He couldn't see what was going on. The introduction of the piece started. The choir stood up on cue and looked down to see the priest kneeling in front of a man naked from the waist down at the head of the aisle in the church. The choir tried to sing, but instead of coming out with the right notes, there was a loud burst of laughter that permeated the church. And well, I know you've all seen in San Miguel the elaborately decorated nativity scenes at Christmas in the churches. They're all set up with stables and statues of animals and the characters in the story. But before Christmas Eve, usually the statue of baby Jesus hasn't been placed in the manger yet. And often in San Miguel, there are lots of Christmas lights used to dress up these scenes. They're those little commercial lights you buy at Walmart or wherever, and some of them flash, and some of them even play little tunes. One December a few years ago, I went into one of our San Miguel churches, which had a particularly elaborate nativity scene, one with lots of lights. And yes, they had the ones that played the little tunes. And as many elderly women were on their knees praying for Jesus' birth, those lights were playing over and over again. Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus. Of course, they didn't recognize the tune. Well, the funny things that I have witnessed at church were certainly not limited to Catholic churches. I have to say, as Malcolm and I drive to our cottage every year from Mexico, especially when we're going through the southern U.S., I make it my hobby to read those interesting church signs. One of the funniest ones was a sign in front of one of those evangelical churches where people come on Sunday morning for one service and then they return on Sunday night for another. The title of the sermons for that Sunday's two services were on the marquee out in front of the church. The morning sermon was, Jesus Walks on the Water. And the subject for the evening sermon, Looking for Jesus. Okay, enough about other traditions. In my UU ministry, lots of unexpected humorous things have happened as well. Many years ago, when I was candidating for a position as minister, I was required to go to what's called a neutral pulpit church to lead worship and preach, so a committee from a congregation that was considering me could evaluate me. Well, for one of the times, the neutral pulpit was in a church in Bedford, Massachusetts, where the minister was on sabbatical. And the lay leader for that service seemed really unable to tell me how much of anything worked in the service. I was kind of adrift. I asked him about joys and concerns. He said, don't worry about it. Our lay ministers will just take care of that. So I was sitting down and people were coming up to light candles and speak. And I saw there was a rather unusual looking man in the line. He lit a candle and then he walked back a few pews down the aisle, fell on his knees, and proposed marriage to a woman seated there. She let out what seemed to be a rather unpleasant gasp and moved away, sort of ducking down under the pew. The congregation freezes. And the lay ministers, who are supposed to be doing everything, are totally silenced and all looking at me, as I'm sure was the committee who was evaluating me. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know if these two even know each other or if he's the local sexual predator. She seems uncomfortable and overwhelmed, and he looks like a wide-eyed puppy dog, and no one's saying anything. You could feel the tension in the room. I think I realized then that I was actually walking towards the pulpit with no idea of what I was going to say. Finally, what came out of my mouth was, "Do you folks do this every week?" Well, there was a laugh and it broke the tension. And by that time, the two were hugging in the center aisle. I decided this was enough of joys and concerns, so I just skipped and jumped in to introduce the offering, at which point this
Thank you for having me today.
continued to upstage the service by dancing in front of the pulpit to the offertory music. Well, I got through the candidating process and was offered and accepted the job as minister of the First Parish of Stowe and Acton, Massachusetts at that time. You met many of those folks in our joint service earlier this year. Well, as I prepared for my very first Sunday service as their minister, I was a bit nervous. Many people had told me what their expectations of worship were, and of course, each person pretty much contradicted the one before. Many of them told me I should never do this, and others told me I should always do that. One person told me that she loved the sermons the interim minister gave, and another how much he hated them. And some spoke to me of the beloved minister emeritus who attended worship every Sunday there. Okay, that was when one of my red flags went up. Ministers emeriti don't usually attend every week, especially when a new minister is just getting started. But everyone assured me that the Reverend Don Kafka would be a great supporter and, quote, would never do anything to interfere with or upstage my ministry. Well, soon came my first Sunday in the pulpit, and the church was full, and I wanted to start things off on the right foot by starting on time. So I got out of my chair as the hour struck, approached the pulpit to give the opening words, and just as I opened my mouth, the automatic door of the handicapped entrance just to my right of the pulpit flung open. And trying to rush to get in before the service started, there was Don, that minister emeritus, darting out the door with his walker. Now, Don had a medical condition where he moved in fits and starts. Sometimes, and especially when he was stressed, he couldn't get his legs to move at all. Well, he got right in front of the pulpit and his legs froze. He was stuck directly in front of me as I was trying to give the opening words. His wife, a rather feisty woman, now got into the act, ordering him to move and trying to pull him along. At that point, those words from the people on the committee that had selected me came to mind. Reverend Kafka will never do anything to upstage you in the pulpit. I had to just stop and laugh. Well, it turned out we became great friends, and he never was anything but supportive, and it was an honor to officiate at both he and his wife's memorial service. Well, lots of humor in churches that I've served has come from kids. When you ask those kids the questions and the message for all ages, you just really never know what they're going to say, and I've had many funny incidents. But my favorite service with children was the 4 p.m. Christmas Eve service that we did, when we created a nativity scene by pulling old costumes out of an old trunk. Kids were wide-eyed and excited, and most of the time the story moved right along with the kids playing with stuffed animals as I spoke. Over the years, I built up really quite a collection of stuffed animals for this event. We had a camel and lots of sheep and a donkey and even a soft, very floppy cow that couldn't stand up on its own. Well, one year, this little boy was intrigued by the floppy cow. He was pulling at my robe, wanting to say something. So finally, I put the microphone down and let him speak, figuring it would be cute and I would just work with whatever he said to weave it into the story. In the sternest of voices, he announced, "Your cow has mad cow disease and you need to shoot it." Not exactly what I was expecting. I think I replied, "The cow's fine and we're going to go on with the story," or something like that. But I have to admit, I was a bit off my game for the rest of the service. In my ministry in Stowe, Mass, there were also lots of funny stories that took place at places other than in the service. Often, especially if I had not brought a lunch, I'd run down to the local grocery store to grab something. After several incidents, I have to say, I began to become leery about going to a market so close to the church. One day, I was walking up and down the aisle, and I could see that this woman was looking at me. I sort of recognized her, but I was in a hurry and I just kept moving. Soon I turned down another aisle that was rather crowded, and our shopping carts came head to head. She looked right at me and said in a loud, clear voice that everyone could hear, "How can you not recognize me? You married me." All heads turned, and finally I collected my wits enough to say, "Oh, you mean I officiated at your wedding?" On another occasion, in the very same store, as again I was going up and down the rows, I kept seeing a different woman who was staring at me. I had no idea who she was, and I just went about my business. Again, with lots of people nearby, she blatted out, "Oh, now I know who you are. You're the minister at the church. You look really different with your clothes on." At that point, everyone was staring at me, and I was trying to think what to say. Finally, it dawned on me what she was saying, and I said as loud as I could to those waiting for a response, "Oh, you mean I look different when I'm not wearing my clerical robe?" Well, I definitely didn't follow George Burns' advice. The sermon might have been even a little bit longer than usual, but I hope having a few laughs made it seem shorter. A good laugh is good for the body and the soul. And further, what I want you to know is that this fellowship is not a place where you should check your sense of humor at the door. When the world is tough and depressing, when we struggle with important issues in our own community, let's lighten up a bit. Even maybe laugh at ourselves from time to time. I believe that the people who do the best job of building community, of ministering to each other, of confronting tough questions, of changing the world, do not do so with anger in their hearts or a puss on their face. They do so with a smile on their face, joy in their hearts, and even laughter on their lips. So let's lighten up, loosen up, feel the love, and experience the joy. thank you for being with us today, and I hope you'll join us again next Sunday. After the postlude, you can join a breakout room to see old friends and meet new ones, perhaps discuss the questions that have been posted in the chat, and maybe even have a few laughs together. If this is your first Sunday with us, or you've just recently started attending, please do stay on after the service. It would be great if you would not go to a breakout room, but just stay in the main room where I and perhaps some members of our welcome team will be there to personally welcome you. We'll now extinguish the chalice flame, but not the light. Not the light of truth and justice and love, not the light of joy and fun and laughter that we will carry with us for the week ahead. And as we close, I feel I need to recognize that we are a divided congregation. You see, some of us are definitely cat people, and others of us are 100% dog people. Now, I'm sure the cat faction were affirmed by the prelude, but now, in the interest of fairness, we'll give an approximately equal amount of time to the dog faction. Wouldn't it be great if the dog and cat could make some beautiful music together?
Careful, where you swinging that? Wow, that, what a performance by both you kids. Incredible, incredible.